All right. Looks like we timed this perfectly. What is going on? It is yours truly. First of all, shout out Instagram family over here. So all of my other live stream folks, when you see me look this direction here, is because I'm looking at my phone, watching my Instagram followers. I am yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre, favorite board certified internist, founder of drbarrypierre.com. Bring you another edition of our what I'm calling Friday night live streams. Right. So this is what I wanted to do on a at least a weekly basis, right? Like typically, especially for my YouTube followers, we have the Medicine Mondays that we have our typical kind of I don't want to say scripted show, but more of a kind of, recorded type show, we're edited and everything else. But I also wanted to come live because a lot of things typically happen like throughout the week that I wanted to touch base on. So here we are, right? And again, if you're watching me on Instagram, I am going live on essentially mostly all of my platforms, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Periscope/Twitter. We are there. And the reason why I probably suggest going over there is because I will be doing, especially when I do these lives, I do a lot of screen sharing with my computer, right? And because you're on Instagram, you can't typically see the screen share. So of course you can hear what I'm saying, but you can't really see, the websites I may be showing, which we're going to be showing a lot today, right? So we got a great night in order. Unfortunately, right? Like I wish I could come to these things and not have a lot to talk about, but we unfortunately got a lot of things to talk about today. A lot of crazy things are happening this week in health. A lot of it is centered around, the COVID-19 virus, right? And most importantly, the vaccines, right? So I think we should first start there, right? Like again, we're going to start off, talking about the state of Texas. Right, and the state of Mississippi, but more importantly, the state of Texas. That's what kind of kicked these things off. So earlier this week, the governor, right, announced that, he was letting everything just kind of reign free, right? Like he was cool and comfortable with, businesses back to 100%, right? He was saying like, the state is back open again, right? Which sounds crazy, right? Like it almost kind of drowns out the great news that we got with this third vaccine popping up, which, I've talked, if you listen to this week's podcast, which I suspect you do, again, Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry, or listen to drbarry.com, you'll get to there. I suggest you definitely listen to that to hear about the newest podcast. Hear about the newest vaccine that is out. But again, so we have this governor, right, who is like, everything is gravy. Let's open it back up like nothing is going on, right? And of course, again, I'm not here to put words in people's mouth, right? So first, let me share my screen again, just so we can kind of read some of his words, right? Because again, it really, guys, it really makes no sense whatsoever, right? That a head of state would even be recommending opening things back up like everything's all peachy keen, right? Because everything is not peachy keen at this moment, but kind of here we are. And let me share, zoom my screen out a little bit so you can see that. So what I'm showing here, Governor Abbott lifts mask mandate, opens Texas 100%. Right. Which again makes absolutely no sense in the world. And here's his quote. With the medical advancements of vaccines and antibody therapeutic drugs, Texas now has the tools to protect Texans from the virus. We must now do more to restore the livelihoods and normalcy for Texans by opening Texas 100%. Make no mistake, COVID-19 has not disappeared, but it is clear from the recoveries, vaccinations, reduced hospitalizations, and safe practices that Texans are using that state mandates are no longer needed. And I think this was like the funnier, like, not really funny, but this was the funniest aspect of this kind of quote, right? With this executive order, we are ensuring that all businesses and families in Texas have the freedom to determine their own destiny, right? So essentially he's saying like, hey, you know what? I'm giving y'all the opportunity to do y'all, right? Whatever happens, right, after I open it up is kind of on y'all, right? And let me, as a public health official, right, as a physician, let me tell you what's going to happen, as everything opens up, right? You're going to have a lot of people, right, who go out and say, you know what, everything is free. I'm not wearing my mask, and they're going to go out and frolic, right? So we fully expect COVID numbers to increase, right, in the state of Texas, right? And it's not like they needed any help increasing, right? For those who may not realize it, Texas is the number 3, right? Number 3 state in the country for COVID-19, like, diagnosis. Number 3 state in the country for deaths, right? So this is a state that did not need any help spreading this virus more. It did not, right? But unfortunately, we have this government who clearly is more focused on the business related standpoint. Again, business as usual, which he kind of stated. He said, like, hey, I want everything to go back to quote unquote normal, right? Business as usual, open up again, right? And because not only is he saying, I'm removing this mask mandate, but he's also saying all those restaurants and stuff, you can open up 100%. Again, as a, and again, I should be one to talk, right? I'm in the state of Florida, right? Where it's not like we're doing that much better, right, in the state of Florida, because we're really not, right? We're number 5, right? We're number 5 on, cases and deaths. We're not doing that much better, right? But like as a just as a concerned physician, right? Like I get very weary, right? That unfortunately, again, right, we have politicians, making decisions that are not based on scientific data, not based on scientific facts, right? And that is going to be scary for a lot of people. Again, I fully expect numbers to go up. And again, of course, they're going to try to blame other reasons why the number is going up, right? Because again, the plays devil's advocate, right? Because I already know what the arguments are going to be. Well, Dr. Pierre, like we got our vaccines, we got all these things. How come we can't just open up? Now, if Texas, right, was a state, let's say a model state, right? If Texas was a model state where, they were giving out the vaccinations like candy, then I'd be right with you, right? I say, you know what, maybe Texas might have a point, right? But Texas already ranks towards the bottom amongst states who've gotten, an allotment of vaccinations and have actually given it to them, right? And again, I'm going to quickly screen share just so you guys can kind of visually see what I'm referencing here as well. Because like I said, I always say confirm everything, right? You hear, right? Especially in a time like this, right, where medical misinformation is very rampant, right? Like, depending on if this is your first time catching it, you should question whether I'm like a regular physician, right? Like your skills of deducing it should be that high, right? Like you should question everything. So if you're watching on, Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, this is a map, right, of the United States, right, where it is lighter colors means less than 15%, darker colors mean more than 20%. And those percentages are, the percentage of the population of that state that's been vaccinated, right? So again, you don't even have to look at the numbers here, right? Like it's clear as day that Texas is one of the lighter states here, right? Like it's just clear as day, right? Which means not only, again, as big as they are, right, as many people in the state of Texas, they're not doing a good job getting, right, vaccines to where they need to get to, right? So again, when you just think from a rationale standpoint, right, again, we could just kind of click these numbers here. It says 14% of Texans have received at least one dose of the vaccine. So that's 14%, one dose of the vaccine, 7.7% at least two doses of the vaccine. And again, right now, as they're marking this, we're only referencing the fact that there's 2 vaccines out, Moderna and Pfizer, right? Especially when they kind of mention the fact that they say 2 vaccines. And then when we'll talk about Johnson & Johnson later, right? Which again will definitely be a game changer for a lot of people. So again, this is one of the last states, right, in the country, right, that should be walking around saying like, oh, now that vaccines are here, now that we can test everybody, good to go. Open up business, open up 100%. Everyone go back to school. Like all of these things that they shouldn't be doing, they're championing for, right? And again, that's I think is the scary, aspect here, right? Because you're going to see more states follow suit. That's going to happen, right? You're going to see more states be like, hey, well, Texas, right, doesn't need these restrictions, right? Why should our state be the one with restrictions, right? So you're going to see more and more states pop up and say, you know what, businesses open up 100% again. Restaurants opened up 100% again. Again, because they're not thinking from the scientific standpoint, right? They're thinking strictly from the dinero, right? Strictly from a financial benefit. What is the financial, ramifications here? And again, we have some scary times, right? We dealt with an administration, right, that continuously put politics over science, politics over common sense, and we're already seeing this kind of happen now. And this is despite, right? This is despite the fact that we are doing a very good job getting vaccines out. Unlike the fumbling that we had, especially when Moderna and Pfizer came out, we are actually doing a very good job getting vaccines out and giving people vaccines who they need to. Right now, still could be better. Right, again, we could talk about geographical, we could talk about race and everything else. Still could be much better, but like the onus, right? The onus of getting said vaccines, like we're trying to do a good job. And again, I'm not here to say that we should never open up, right? Or we should wear, masks for the rest of our life. I'm not here to say that. I'm just here to say that, like, let's at least, see these numbers go down, right? Let's at least see, our vaccination rates go up. Let's at least see some things there before we be like, let's just go ahead and open things up. Right. Because again, once you open up, right, it's going to be very difficult. We know to close again. Right. So now what he said again, that's why I like that line that he put, right? Like, oh, it's up to you guys' destiny. Right. So essentially saying like, hey, if some of y'all live, right, congratulations. If some of y'all die, hey, the greater good was we needed our businesses to open up again. Right. Which is, again, just terrible on all fronts here in our regards. Right. So again, Texas. Again, to all my Texas, followers and people who, acquaintances and everything else, man. I'm praying for you guys. I know I saw Mississippi said they're doing it as well. And Mississippi, again, another state, right, that should not be following suit because they got problems in all kinds of ways, right? So that's another state that's got all kinds of problems that should not be like rushing, right, to do this thing and opening up, but it is, right? So, we're as a physician, right, all we can do is educate, right, and take care of the patients when they come, because I fully expect more patients will come, with these types of things here, right? Like it's just, just a scary time here. So when we look at the next line, right, Detroit, mayor, right, and again, a good friend of mine. A good friend and lawyer, Michael Switten, right, like sent this to me, right, about this mayor in Detroit, right, and I got there's some issues, there's a few issues I got with it, but like one, I think is going to be very concerning, and again, so it's the article's titled "Detroit Mayor Dugan doubles down on not wanting Johnson & Johnson vaccine for foreseeable future. City rejects 6,200 Johnson & Johnson vaccines, and the amount was not replaced, right? So it's not like they I don't want the Johnson & Johnson, just give me more Moderna and Pfizer. That ain't occurred, right? He was like, I just don't want 6,200 vaccines. He feels that the vaccine is not good enough. He feels that because Moderna and Pfizer have better rates as far as preventing severe illness and whatnot, that he doesn't even want Detroit to have it, right? So he essentially has answered, right, the question for all the folks in Detroit, like, you know what, I'm not even giving my city members, right, the option, right, to get this vaccine, right? And we know, right, again, and we were talking about this when Moderna and Pfizer came out, and all of the concerns people had with Moderna and Pfizer. We know that we needed choices out here, and for various reasons, right? We needed choices out here because we needed the ability, right, to say like, hey, you know what? Maybe you can't, maybe you don't want this mRNA vaccine, right? But like, hey, we got this different option here, right? And yes, it doesn't have the same pretty numbers, 94, 95%, like the first two, right? But one of the best numbers, it has 66% and 85%, 85% being the risk of you having severe illness from COVID, right? And again, and I'm going to stress this again, right? I'm going to stress this a lot. Getting COVID, right, is not the problem. right? Like, and again, it may sound crazy, right? Getting COVID is not the problem. Getting sick from COVID is the issue. There's a lot of y'all, right? Like the numbers right now, again, I think last time I checked was about 28 million in the United States were diagnosed with COVID. There's a lot of people who are walking around with COVID-19 who have no clue they have COVID-19. So clearly getting getting the virus is not the issue. The problem is when you get sick from it. So here you have it again, and we're still on this website here, right? Johnson & Johnson is a very good vaccine. Moderna and Pfizer are the best. And I'm going to do everything I can to make sure the residents of the city of Detroit get the best, right? So again, I don't think there was any argument, especially if the number we're not arguing that aspect, right? But there are some valid reasons why people did not want to get the Moderna and Pfizer, right? They were concerned, they hadn't heard of mRNA vaccines before, and they had some valid reasons for not getting it. Right. So this was going to be a good option, right, for those who had issues dealing with the first two, right, as far as the type of vaccine they were. And unfortunately, he's essentially saying, you know what, I don't care. Right. Like, we don't want that at all. So what I fear is going to happen. And let me just stop my screen real quick. What I fear is going to happen is that now you're going to have a cohort of people in the city of Detroit who didn't take Moderna and Pfizer, even though they could have, right? Because again, it's not as if everyone who could have gotten Moderna and Pfizer got Moderna and Pfizer, right? There's reasons why they didn't get it, right? We understand that. We've talked about that before. But like, because they didn't get it, now you're not even giving them the option to try to get this third one, right? So now that they don't have the option to get the third one, guess what? They're not going to get the vaccines whatsoever. So you're making this political, grandstanding of, oh no, we only want the best, right? Which again is BS, right? But we understand, right, like that. Like, there's going to be some people who don't get the Moderna and Pfizer because they just don't want those two vaccines, right? So now you don't even give, your city members, right, an option to get this third one, which again got emergency use. And I talked about this on a podcast. Just got emergency use this past Monday, right, to start shipping out. And it's actually going to start shipping out. Like, the numbers, they're saying about 20 to 30 million vaccine doses by the end of the month, 100 million by the end of the year. Again, check out the podcast, for more details on that. But like, it's concerning, right? Because now all of those City Gold members are not going to be able to get that opportunity to get that vaccine, right? Which means now their risk for getting COVID still remains high, which means their risk for spreading COVID still remains high, which means their risk of getting sick and then invading the hospitals, right, is going to be there, right? And all you're going to be is like, well, we only wanted the best, right? Like, again, it doesn't make any sense. And the fear is that you're going to have you may have more and more, uneducated folks, right, like, follow this same logic, right, and not necessarily think about the fact that there's certain areas, right? Again, remember we talked about Moderna and Pfizer. You have to have this refrigeration. It has to be in deep freeze, and the length of time that you can hold it is very short compared to Johnson & Johnson, right? So there are certain areas that couldn't get the Moderna and Pfizer. They just couldn't, right? Like your local health department clinics, they couldn't get it, right? But they could have gotten the Johnson & Johnson. And now you've essentially said, like, no, you're not getting that either, right? So now you have areas, and those clinics, right, health departments typically serve underserved patients, right? So now you have a whole bunch of underserved patients who, again, don't have a spot, right? Don't have like a location to go to. And then they may be forced to go to a different location in hope to get this 2-shot, right, vaccine dose, either Moderna or Pfizer, versus getting the 1-shot that Johnson & Johnson was, right? So again, very scary, very unfortunate, decision. Again, I hope, right, like something, shakes and kind of turns that around, because I think that's going to be, very scary for a lot of city goers in the city of Detroit, because again, it just is what it is, right? Like, if you already don't have access, or you already have access related issues, right, you can't be blocking people's blessings, right? Like, that Johnson & Johnson was going to be people's blessings, right? Because they were like, hey, you know what? I don't live in that part of town. I can get to that certain area, or like, I just don't want that Moderna. I don't want that Pfizer. I don't want that mRNA vaccine, right? They heard some crazy things and like they fully believe it, but I'm gonna get that Johnson & Johnson. I know the type of vaccine that Johnson & Johnson is. Like, I'm okay with, the lower percentages, right? Because I know the goal, right, isn't that I don't get COVID, right? Like, and again, we stress this again. Getting the virus is not the problem. It's getting sick. And then seeing a person like me, right? Seeing a person like me in the hospital is the problem with COVID-19, not just because you got it, right? If you get it, you're asymptomatic, or you're very mild, you're able to take care of it at home, you're okay, right? The problem is that you get it, you get sick, your family gets it, your family gets sick. Everyone ends up seeing me at the same time. Like, as a hospital physician, you'd be surprised how many families I take care of, like, at the same time. Like, oh, my husband is two rooms down, and my daughter was here. Like, I've taken care of multiple family members all at the same time, all got sick at the same time. Like, that's the issue. Getting the virus is an issue, is the fact that if you get that virus, you can get very, very, very sick, right? And that's what we need to avoid. That's what we're trying to avoid here. But again, the city of Detroit and this mayor is like, no, we're too good for it. And that is not the right thought process behind it. Again, like I said, I hope things, get adjusted and change from that standpoint there. And again, like I said, we're just kind of, flow into it. Like I said, Johnson & Johnson, third vaccine is here. Right. Again, check the podcast this week, episode 166. Episode 166 for it. It is the Johnson & Johnson is here. Right. It is something that we have been waiting for. Right. We've been waiting for a third horse. Right. In this, in this race. Right. Against COVID-19. Right. Like, like I said, it's been kicking our butt. 28 million plus affected. Right. In about a year. Over 500,000 people died, aka not coming home ever again, right? Because of this virus, right? So we need as much help and support as possible. Johnson & Johnson got unanimous support from the FDA, got emergency use authorization on Monday. They're going to start shipping it out everywhere. And really, not only is it going to be big for us, as far as having another bullet in the gun, right? But it's also going to be a fact that, again, like I kind of mentioned, you're going to have these health departments, you're going to have these underserved areas, you're going to have these clinics, all these places that, didn't have the facilities, right, to get Moderna and Pfizer, and now but they're able to get Johnson & Johnson, right? Like, game changer. And again, like just say we're seeing the vaccination rates going up. I expect it to continue to shoot up, especially, as this as this vaccine gets distributed out. And now, again, obviously we're United States. Most of the people who are watching are from the United States, but remember, this is a global pandemic. Like I said, we're still in the middle of a pandemic, y'all. Like, regardless of what folks are telling you, we're still in the middle of a pandemic. Travel restrictions are still here. We're still wearing masks, right? Like, that ain't changing. And understanding that this is going to be huge globally as well. Right. Like, so again, just like I said, exciting times with the Johnson & Johnson, vaccination that are here. So definitely kind of be on the lookout for that. And, last but not least, man, I hate that I even have to like touch on this, right? But like, it's sad, right, that in 2021, right, we're still having to deal with folks thinking, right, and then I'm talking straight to the medicine folks, right? The folks in healthcare, right? Because obviously, when you look, especially when you look on TV, Black Lives Matter, everything else was happening, right? And a lot of times we focus on the injustices that are happening, especially within the legal system, right? And, the police and the brutality and all that. And we know, right, where there's some ain't folks over there in that police department and the legal department. Like, we know, and the politics, we know that, right? But I think medicine, right, for some reason, a lot of folks in medicine have led themselves to believe that somehow we've been able to skip past all of that, right? Like, somehow, some way, we've been able to take the cream of the crop, right? Who's all about, racial kumbaya and, everyone's equal. Like, for some reason, there's still a lot of people, right, in medicine, right? And unfortunately, in significant positions, right, in medicine, who really think, right, that somehow medicine is not stained by racism, and medicine is not like continuously having to fight this uphill battle, right, against it, right? Again, I gotta say most, a lot of the vaccine hesitancy, right, especially in the African American community, Hispanic community, a lot of it, right, is solely focused on the fact of the racial atrocities that occurred on behalf of medicine, right? And I like when people are like, I don't know why they won't take the vaccine. No, I know exactly why they want to. Like, we can give you like multiple reasons why they won't take the vaccine. You just have to acknowledge it, right? And this lack of acknowledgement still continues to occur. I was on Twitter, and I seen the Twitter feeds going crazy, right? And typically when they go crazy, like, I'm like, especially the med Twitter, when they go crazy, I'm like, oh, what's happening over here, right? And then I seen this tweet, that they highlighted, right? Now, this tweet came out like a few weeks ago, right? So I'm not sure how it slipped through the cracks, but it did. So let's go ahead and share that, so we can. And again, like I said, I like to take people's exact quote, that way no one is, said I'm misconstruing what they're saying, right? So, and for Instagram, I did post this on my story, like, I think yesterday, but it might already be deleted. So it says, this is from JAMA, right? One of the premier medical, especially in the maternal medicine standpoint, one of the premier medical, journal peer-reviewed articles out there, right? No physician is racist. So how can there be structural racism in healthcare? An explanation of the idea by Doctors for Doctors in this user-friendly podcast, right? So structural racism for doctors, what is it, right? So, like, first of all, let's talk about this, like, the crazy BS, right? The fact that someone would let this tweet off, right? People be like, yeah, no physician is racist. Stop right there, right? Like, once you type no blank is racist, you should stop right there, right? Clearly, you're about to say some BS, right, that you're not going to be able, right, to like combat, right? So the fact that they already start off saying no physician is racist, right, already lets you know how tone deaf, right, like the person who not only said this tweet, the person who okayed this tweet, the person who, like, and we're going to talk about, the content that went on, during the podcast episode, because it was a podcast episode, right? And again, as a podcaster myself, I know it's very easy for people to take, little sound bites, sound clips here and there, and, make it to what they wanted to make it, right? I know that's very easy. People do that with blogs. People do, like, so I know that. So I like, I'm going to give it a chance. I'm going to listen, right, to the whole, it was only 15 minutes. I'm going to listen to the whole podcast episode, just so, like, again, I just, so I'm hoping, maybe this was what they meant, right? And unfortunately, after listening to that episode, right, like, not only is this what they meant, but like, you could tell, like, this is what they actually believe, right? So they said no physician is racist, right? How can structural racism, how can there be structural racism in healthcare, right? So again, they really are truly, right, like, they're really and truly in disbelief, right, of this structural racism, or this term, which they probably don't even believe in, which they kind of hinted at, right? That at least one, right? Again, we'll give credit to one of the doctors, right? At least one, where they really don't believe, like, how is it even possible to have structural racism in healthcare if nobody is racist, right? That's what they're saying here. And of course, rightfully so, they got lambasted, right? All over social media, to the point where they actually had to offer a retraction, which I absolutely love. We'll read their retraction in a second, but I want to give a highlight of the podcast episode, right? So again, like I said, don't take my word for it, right? I fully expect you guys to go ahead and, in fact, I wonder if I can, especially for my live viewers. Let's see if I can post a link out to the comment there. So I put a link out to this episode, to that podcast episode, because like I want you to listen to it for yourself, right? Again, trust but verify. They start out right. They start out good, right? They start out talking about how their two Jewish physicians, right, how their families, right, had to like change their last name, right? Like they couldn't say what their last name really was, right? For fear of retribution, for fear of not being able to get a job, right? Like they commented, they say it, like they knock it right out the park. They say like, yeah, I couldn't even get a job, right? Like, so I had to change my name. I think I know one was Livingston. I think the other was Katz, right? Like I had to change my name to do that, right? So they started off right on the right foot, right? Like, and I was like, yeah, okay, I like where this is going, and then it just went downhill there, right? Because it was very clearly evident, right, that one of the physicians, one had no belief that we were still dealing with racist related issues here. Like multiple times he mentioned the fact that, they passed laws in the 60s. Like, why are we still talking about this? And a very common tactic that gets used, right, especially for people who do not like to acknowledge racism, right, is they always say something like, well, maybe we shouldn't call it racism because people feel uncomfortable, right? You know who feels uncomfortable, right, when you talk about racism? People who benefit from racism, right? Those are the only people who feel uncomfortable, right, when you talk about racism. Anyone who is wrongly affected by racism loves talking about racism. They don't have any issues or concerns or problems talking about racism. But when someone actually benefits, right, from it, right? Again, well, let's take out racism, right? Let's say patriarchy, right? Talk about patriarchy, and you're gonna have a lot of men be like, "Oh, come on, what are you doing?" I don't like. Again, because they understand they benefit from it, right? So if they acknowledge, right, how terrible, right, patriarchy is, right, they have to acknowledge that they're benefiting from something so terrible, right? So the same ilk happens. It happens in all fields, but especially in medicine. You talk about racism, and all of a sudden people like start tap dancing, right? Because they're like, whoa, hey. I don't want to be, I don't want to be put in that group there. Sorry, fam. You're like, you benefit from that group over there. So I'm going to put you in that group over there. Right. So they came out. Right. And again, it was just, and they had one doctor who kept like mentioning it, actually was giving great examples, right, of how structural racism has affected, right, disproportionate communities, Blacks, Hispanics, Asian American. Like they gave example after example, but the other doctor was like, nah, like, yeah, but like if they just do this, if they pull their self by the bootstraps, right, they'll be fine. And clearly by the end of the show, you could tell that the words had not sunk in whatsoever, right? And it still kind of reiterated the fact that, well, yeah, I just think that we probably shouldn't bring up racism because it causes too much strife and too much of a divide. And fortunately, like I said, after a lot of public, right, lambasting, right, they ate those words up very quickly. Again, let's read their words, right? Because again, that's, like I said, that's our goal. Like I said, we're just gonna read what they say. So, no one says. And like I said, if you're on Instagram, I'm sharing on all of my platforms: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook as well too. So you can read it, but I read it out here. So this is the words, right? So on now, if you're watching this, right, don't mind the emoji that I actually put that emoji on, because I actually put this on my story. So on February 24th, 2021, JAMA tweeted about a recently posted podcast discussing structural racism in medicine. The language of the tweet, as well as portions of the podcast, do not reflect my commitment as editorial leader of JAMA and JAMA Network to call out and discuss the adverse effects of injustice, inequity, and racism in medicine and society, as JAMA has done for many years. I take responsibility for these lapses and sincerely apologize for both the lapses and the harm caused by both the tweet and some aspects of the podcast. JAMA will schedule a podcast in the future to further discuss issues of structural racism in health and to address concerns raised about the podcast. Right. So this was by Dr. Howard Buchner, who is the editor-in-chief of JAMA and JAMA Network. Right. So again, please, we're obviously very copped very quickly, right? Because again, once they like went in on this tweet, like I said, they let this tweet out like on the 24th of February. It must have just kind of slid by until people were like, hold on, what are they saying here? Right. And, started really calling out on it. Right. So, please recop, apologies were sent. But as you can see here, right, a lot of, hey, you know what? I apologize for the tweet, and I apologize for some parts of the podcast. Again, as I take responsibility, like again, just a lot of like, please don't kill me, right? And which again, what we want to see, right, is this level of acknowledgement, but it's got to happen much quicker, right? This again, it did not happen after the first person retweeted it. It happened after a whole bunch of people started going in left and right. And again, for those who don't know, I am a member of the health equity committee for the American College of Internists, right? So again, like these are some of the things that we talk about. Right. Like we talk about like how in medicine, right, like we to continuously put this blinders on, right, like racism, right, isn't all around us, right? Like racism doesn't, affect the way we write our test questions, right? It doesn't affect the way we choose who's in medicine in general, right? Like we affect that. Again, I talked about black men in white coats about that, right? Like racism has been around us for as long as we can remember, right? But because we continually try to brush it off and try to downplay, right, its severe effects, right? Like you get podcasts like these, right? So and again, it looks like they're going to drop a whole bunch of podcast episodes, or a few podcast episodes about it. Hopefully, right, they get some people on there who can really talk about just the racial inequities associated specifically with medicine. Like I said, I follow some amazing people, right? So if anyone, especially from the JAMA folks, right, if anyone from the JAMA folks are following me, let me know. Like I follow some amazing women. I'm so mad I can't think of their at names right now, right? Who I like focus on like racial inequity. Like they do that, right? So like I said, again, anyone from JAMA who happen to be following me, just hit my DMs and I will forward you their information to follow. So again, that's that's it, man. I hated that we had to end that note, but like I said, this week was a busy week, right? Like I said, I was hoping that we were just going to be very hype. We were going to be talking about the Johnson & Johnson, but so much BS happened, especially from a health related standpoint, that we had to make sure we address and kind of keep it moving, right? So again, I appreciate all of the my watchers this evening, right? Whether you watch me on my YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, whether you watch me on Instagram, again, much appreciative. I am yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre, board certified internist, founder of drbarrypierre.com, host of the Lunch and Learn with Dr. Barry podcast, host of Medicine Mondays on our YouTube channel. Make sure you check that out. You see the screen below, especially if you're watching me live. Text Dr. Barry to 44222. Join the Lunch and Learn community. Get acclimated to this way of life as far as getting your health, making sure health is just fun again, right? Getting yourself healthy, right? Like I said, we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? Like if you're not focused on your health now, you probably will never ever be focused on your health, and there's really nothing I can do about that, right? So you guys be blessed. Have a great evening, and I'm gonna see you guys next week, right, for live stream Fridays with yours truly, Dr. Barry Pierre.